A new United Nations report reveals that female athletes lost almost 900 medals to transgender athletes competing against them in women's sports categories. The report found, quote, over 600 female athletes in more than 400 competitions have lost more than 890 medals in 29 different sports.
The wide-ranging report was created by Reem Assalam, the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. The report put blame on the international federations and national governing bodies for policies that allowed born males to compete in women's categories. Al-Salam further noted that male athletes had specific attributes, including higher strength and testosterone levels, that can be advantageous and result in, quote, loss of fair opportunity for female competitors. Plus, Al-Salam argued that testosterone suppression did not make competition fair. Specifically, she wrote, quote, this approach may not only harm the health of the athlete concerned, but it also fails to achieve its stated objective. Therefore, the testosterone levels deemed acceptable by any sporting body are, at best, not evidence-based, arbitrary, and asymmetrically favor males. Al-Salam argued that open categories should be created for sports to ensure both fairness and inclusive participation.
Unrelated to the trans issue, Al-Salam found female athletes are also subject to other forms of violence when it comes to sport, including physical abuse, pervasive sexism, exclusion, and limited access to training facilities and resources. So the second part of this report was actually a majority of the report, and I think it's very important to emphasize that. But this is one person's report. While it was reported at the UN General Assembly, let's be very clear, this was not something that the General Assembly concluded or voted on or made some statement on. It is a report that happened within the UN. With that being said, there's been some issues in terms of some of these reports being influenced, especially with the Olympic committees, by Russia. And there's been a lot of pushback in that Russian Federation, angry that they have, especially in the Olympic community, have been ostracized and pushed out for several reasons, violating the rules when it comes to steroids and pumping their athletes with an advantage. They're acting out by funding sort of rogue organizations that appear to be totally universally accepted with these reports that are flawed. We know what the facts are here. You have women in the Olympic Committee coming out, Billie Jean King, Brooke Ford, Megan Rapinoe, Erin McLeod, Dwayne Wade. These are folks who are saying this is not an issue. This is a small group of people. And to also lump in middle-sex people, which are not trans, who have a higher testosterone, it's really not impacting. This is a manufactured debate that is there to influence and rile up and put fear into folks, but the majority of women who are athletes do not buy into this. Now, are there a few that are vocal and concerned? Sure. But again, the IOC has said the NCAA has allowed the trans community to compete in sports for years. But now suddenly, the Russian-backed group is issuing their own reports and raising alarm. It's suddenly in the mainstream.
What is the evidence that Russia has influenced this United Nations report?
I didn't say so. I think we have to take everything into consideration.
You mentioned their influence supposedly on the Olympic Committee, but that begs the question, why did the Olympics allow two supposedly intersex athletes to compete at this past Summer Olympics, even when Russia was complaining about it? That would suggest the opposite of Russian influence. And it's not like the United Nations is exactly like a far-right group, right? It's easy for athletes, by the way, to say that they support transgender participation when they've never had to actually compete against a biological male. Megan Rapinoe comes to mind as an example of that category. And you say it's not a big deal, it's only a small handful of people, but the whole point of this UN report is that it has numbers. Over 600 female athletes in more than 400 competitions have lost more than 890 medals in 29 different sports. This is clearly more pervasive than we've been led to believe.
But that's not because necessarily they have more testosterone or not. To make an assumption because somebody is potentially trans or middle sex, again, very different, or LGBTQI, we don't really know because sometimes they don't even have to disclose whether or not they're trans. So the report seems a little loosey-goosey with the facts, making assumptions that certain folks, like we saw this summer with the Russian committee, that stated there were two boxers who were trans who were not. I mean, we have to be very clear about these things if there's going to be vast assumptions. I mean, that's why the IOC called out these Russian-backed groups that are trying to influence the conversation, because they're not based in evidence, they're not based in science, they're not based in actual statistics, and they're using the conversation around trans people, women in sports, to rile up a base and anger folks and divide them. And I'd like to know where this, I mean, this was,
Why
again,
would the United Nations be trying to rile people up about transgender?
It was, they allowed somebody to testify at a report. So there's a difference between the General Assembly listening to someone and the General Assembly voting on something.
But she was assigned by the UN to do this report. So why would the UN assign her to do this to rile people up? What is the UN's motivation?
So the UN, when they say go research something and come back,
right?
Studies can be complicated and detailed. So she issued a report, she testified, but they have not said that they agree with it or not.
So do you think she was trying to rile people up?
I don't know. I need the evidence is what I'm trying to say. That there are a lot of numbers put in here that seem to be assumptions, because we know that many athletes do not disclose whether they're trans, whether they're middle sex, because especially with middle sex, it's personal information. And it's not something that a UN report is going to have access to. I mean, that violates personal privacy laws.
Well, it does say specifically transgender athletes, but then I'm also curious, you say it's without scientific evidence. I mean, every biological study available to man indicates that higher testosterone levels throughout puberty influence a person's athletic advantage, right? Because it's not just the testosterone level that indicates whether or not someone's going to perform better. Even after their testosterone levels are suppressed, if they've gone through puberty as a man, they have longer wingspans, they have greater lung capacity, greater heart function. These are all things that contribute to a man having a competitive advantage over a woman.
So I have endometriosis. I have higher testosterone. I'm a woman.
Okay.
Does that mean that I have an advantage over sports because I have endometriosis?
The difference is that you're talking about a comparison of kind versus a comparison of difference. So when we're talking about biological men, they have on average a higher testosterone grouping that any woman would have, even if she has slightly escalated or elevated levels of testosterone.
What about middle sex? Middle sex are not men. They have escalated forms of, they have escalated testosterone. Does that mean that they're not to be included?
I mean, generally, yeah, I actually think so, because they do have the XY chromosomes, or excuse me, the male chromosomes. And when they go through puberty, they tend to have testosterone levels that match a biological man as opposed to a woman. So I do think their inclusion is unfair.
Well, I think that, everybody has a right to have their role in society, and everybody should be able to compete in sports. And if you're middle sex in particular...
Right, and they're offering a separate category for people who don't neatly fit into the male...
Separate... Okay.
Yeah, it's a category for transgender athletes to compete.
And the minority
What's wrong with that?
of people want this. Again, this is not something that is overwhelmingly popular in society.
It is, though. In the United States of America, the majority of people surveyed on this issue say that they do not think men should be competing in women's sports because it's unfair and unsafe.
They say it needs more research.
That's okay.
Well, there's
I'll find
a difference
the poll
between more research and being absolutely against trans people competing in sports.
They're against it, and I'll find the poll for you.
But the IOC, most importantly, the IOC, the NCAA, they've had trans athletes, and there's never been a problem until suddenly...
There has been a problem, though. I mean, Riley Gaines testified about her experience competing against Leah Thomas. She lost out on a state...
Recently, as I said, until recent years, when it is used as a cultural issue of division in the culture wars, suddenly it's an issue because... I mean, but this is
But there was no indication that transgender people were allowed to compete in sports until recently. Well, so at the same time they were allowed to compete is when it became an issue.
When people started to discuss it. We don't, again, privacy laws. Does somebody have to disclose whether or not they're middle sex? No, they have privacy laws. So when the Republicans decided to talk about bathroom bans, 12 years ago, suddenly this conversation, by design, I think the right wing has used it as a wedge issue by talking about a minority and putting fear in multiple communities and making it dominate conversations. But the reality is that this has occurred for years, and the IOC knows that, and they've stated it, and it has not been a problem until it suddenly became a cultural war issue.
All right. I would suggest that the female volleyball player who has permanent brain damage after being spiked in the head by a man would disagree with you. We're going to have to leave it there. We have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this.